Every book has its own story, and Heart Songs is my 7th book, and like the others, it has its own story. Heart Songs began actually about 5 years ago. I'll never forget it. I sat down to meet with my editor for a previous book that I was working on, Lost and Found. I'd been working on the book for nearly a year. It was a traditional publishing arrangement where I had a contract and a deadline, and I received a modest advance. And this was our first editorial meeting, sort of at the halfway point of the book. I was meeting with my editor to hear her reaction to this very first draft of the book. She said, but a lot of this material, and she took about a good ½ inch of the manuscript, she held it between her fingers and she said, it's wonderful stuff. This is great stuff, but it's not for this book. And I thought, oh no, my heart just sank. And she said, don't worry. She said it very brightly. She patted me on the shoulder. She said, don't worry, this is for your next book. And I thought, my next book? I'm not even halfway through with this book. The thought of any next book seemed impossibly far away. With a little bit of thought, I knew that my editor was right. This particular book, Lost and Found, dealt with 3 very specific themes. It was a story of forgiveness and reconciliation and healing between, it was a mother-daughter story. So it was a story of reconciliation, forgiveness, and healing between my mother and myself, who we had a wounded relationship. And it was also a story of healing of an eating disorder, bulimia, that I had struggled with for many years as a younger woman. So because Lost and Found dealt specifically with those themes, we had to focus just on those themes like a laser beam. Everything else had to be carved away. Which, to digress for a moment, what it also reminds me of is writing. I think of writing as more like sculpting than being a painter, because with painting you're putting paint on the canvas, but with sculpting you start with this block of material and you carve away, carve away, carve away. It's all about the carving away to get to the heart of a story. So anyhow, with Lost and Found, I had to stick to those 3 themes, and the trouble was, or not the trouble was, but when the book was done, and the book was great and it was well received and turned out very well, but I realized that there was so much more to my life than that particular story that was in Lost and Found, the story of forgiveness and reconciliation and healing. There were so many more happy times and so many wonderful stories about my mom and dad and my children and my husband, and that I wanted to share. And I guess what I wanted to do, as that late great radio legend Paul Harvey used to say, do you remember he used to say, and now the rest of the story? Well, what I really wanted to share with, especially with my family, was the rest of the story. And I wanted to paint a fuller portrayal of my mom and dad, especially, who were just wonderful people and terrific parents. So I wanted to get the rest of the story out. So I immediately got to work on a collection of true first-person stories that tell the story of an everyday mom, daughter, sister, wife, friend, which would be me, exploring and navigating life's changing seasons. In Heart Songs, I start out with the birth of our daughter, Katie. So I start out being a young mother and then go on to being a member of the sandwich generation, struggling to kind of meet the needs of my family and my husband and children, at the same time caring for my older mother, to losing my mom, becoming an empty nester, and then ultimately being a joyful mother of the bride.